Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. How are you all guys? This is our first stream, and today we are going to react to the very popular video. Like, what is the proof of prophethood? Yes. Uh, wa alaikum assalam. Okay, should we start? Here we go. I have reacted to many Tower videos. This is nothing, bro. Wait a second.
There are signs. There are things that would indicate to you whether that person is speaking the truth or not. And that's exactly what we believe that God has given to his messengers. God has given to his messengers.
Yeah, that's
right? He has given them signs. They were given things that when a person sees them and they study them and they look at them, they know that these are indications that that person must be speaking the truth and they must be truly what they claim to be. It's interesting that C.S. Lewis, he gave a thing which, as a principle of analysis, we Muslims happily accept.
That's nice.
But we don't accept his premise, and I'll tell you why. But he said concerning Jesus, he said that either Jesus, he said this in respect to his belief that Jesus is God, that either Jesus was a liar, or he was deluded, he was mad, or he was speaking truth. And he says, well, if you look at the life of Jesus and what Jesus said and how he behaved, you can eliminate those. You can say, well, he wasn't a liar and he wasn't mad, so he must have been speaking the truth. There is, of course, another possibility. The other possibility is that what has been taught to you about Jesus is not true. And the things that you claim he said, he never actually said. I just say that because although I actually accept the basic argument, I don't accept his conclusions for that extra reason. But let's just say it's actually a totally valid analysis to make of any claim of any individual. Anything anyone claims, anyone makes a claim, they could be lying. Lying means they are purposefully trying to deceive you.
Yeah.
They know very well that what they're saying is untrue, but they are lying. They are purposely trying to deceive you. That's one possibility.
That makes sense.
And this, of course, applies to anyone claiming prophethood. I know what God says. I know God's telling me why you're here, what the purpose of life is, where you're going to. How do you know? God told me. So you can analyze. Is he truthful? Is he a liar? Is he deluded? And each different person will display different characteristics. The liar, and as I'm sure you probably, most of us learn, I don't know, I learned that in my life, right? I learned that usually a lie leads to another lie, which leads to another lie, and then you have to lie to cover.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true. That means a lot.
Up the lie.
But at the half of this video, there's nothing says about the prophethood
that came before. And you could be a good liar, maybe you could go for quite a long time, but sooner or later, the pack of cards of lies just collapses around you. Because you just have to keep on making up lies to cover up. I think most of us hopefully learned that when we were kids, right? Similarly, a deluded person. Now, what's the difference? A deluded person is saying something untrue, but they really genuinely believe it. That's different. You see, the person who is deluded is sincere.
Yeah.
They actually really believe it. So they could display some of the characteristics of a truthful person, right? But actually, they are either, maybe a
Yeah.
devil or a
Purposely
spirit is
deceiving.
telling them, or they have some psychological problem or whatever. They truly believe that they are receiving revelation from God, but indeed, in one way or another, they are just suffering from a delusion.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you can understand, therefore, that the characteristic of that person is very different from the
Prophet
liar.
Muhammad
Very different.
wasn't articulate person.
But there are still ways that you can identify that. The third option, as long as we agree that what we are hearing and observing about this person is accurate, then the third and only third option is that that person is speaking the truth. Now, it's very interesting because if we can apply this criterion to any man who comes along and claims that he is receiving revelation from God, that he is a prophet, and I'm asking you now to make an analysis, to look at the Prophet Muhammad. May God's peace and blessings be upon him. In the light of these three things, just these three things, was he truthful? Was he
He
deluded?
was truthful person.
Or was he a liar?
Even the pagan Arabs,
You could do that by reading his life. First of all, it's very interesting
not a
that,
word
of course,
bad.
there is a long history of polemic against Islam. There is a long history, started with St. John, Saint, I probably wouldn't like to call him a saint actually, but John of Damascus, who wrote the first polemical work against Islam.
Yeah.
And he said some pretty absurd things, including claiming that the Prophet Muhammad died by being attacked by a group of pigs. That's what he actually claimed in his writings. And he pretty much set the standard for quite a few Christian writers after his time, making pretty absurd accusations. And of course, his claim is that Muhammad was a liar. Why did he say this? And why, by the way, almost entirely, and I wouldn't say everyone, the Reverend Boswell, for example, is an exception, and there are others who take a different view today. But I mean, historically, probably up until 100 and 150 years ago, almost without exception, most Christian writers accused the Prophet Muhammad of being a liar. The reason they did that is very simple. Any Christian or Jew who opens the Quran and reads the life of the Prophet Muhammad will be struck by how much consistency and similarity there is between what the Quran says, what the Prophet taught, and what they know from their own religion and scriptures. In fact, some of these things are very detailed matters of theology and philosophy, religious philosophy and law. In fact, some early Christians thought that the Prophet Muhammad was actually a bishop, a former bishop. That is the level of information they recognized him, because they have to explain, where did Muhammad get all this information? Where did he learn about heaven and paradise and the hellfire and Abraham and Noah and the detailed dietary laws and so on? Where did he get this information from? Well, he must have learnt it from a priest, from a rabbi, from this, and then he must have what? Made it up, invented it, and made this religion together. That's the only way they could explain, and still obviously not agree that Islam was the truth, by saying, well, he must be a lie, he must have invented it. And it's very interesting that there is another group of writers, and these writers are much more modern, and people who have now accessed themselves to the sources and have begun to read for themselves about the life of Christ. In other words, not relying upon these Christian polemicists. And they said, well, that we don't really find evidence from the life and character of the Prophet Muhammad that he was a liar. In fact, it's extraordinary. His people used to refer to him, even before he was a prophet, or he claimed to be a prophet, as they would say, they used to refer to him as Al-Amin, the truthful and the trustworthy one. And they give many examples of his behavior, of his character, totally out of character of a person who is a liar. In other words, they testify to his truthfulness, his honesty, his absolute sincerity, and that they say it's not possible that he was a liar. They say, but he must have just thought that he was a prophet. He must have really believed it.
Because they look at his life very carefully and they see episodes like, for example, when he hid in the cave with Abu Bakr. He was running from the whole city to him, and he hid in the cave. And when the Meccans came running up to the cave to kill them, what did he say to his friend? Did he tell him, see if you can find a back way out of the cave? What he told his friend was, relax. He was telling him, I see what you see, but he said, God is with us. God will save us. So people on that basis, they say, you see, he thought he was a prophet. He thought God was with him because he said things like that. He wasn't a liar.
He believed it, but he was, epileptic, and people have epileptic fits. They have these visions and so on and so forth. And so they tried to explain this by saying, well, he was deluded. He thought he was a prophet. That explains his sincerity. That explains his behavior. But of course, he wasn't speaking the truth any more than the liar was, but they can't reconcile his character with being a liar.
The other thing is, take this building that we're in, right? This building has lots of floors, lots of offices. It's run by an owner. This owner, 30 years, he could run this building efficiently, the rent, the bills, the tenants, right? He became the essential ruler of Arabia, and that's a big part of the world. And you have the tribes, and you have the various political games going on. You've got all this stuff going on. A deluded person would not be able to function in that situation.
Such a
And
knowledgeable video in my whole
the
life.
deluded thesis
That's
is
interesting.
so untenable that even the non-Muslim scholars who've looked at his life, I mean, I remember one quote from, I believe it's Montgomery Watt. He said, basically, you claim that he's deluded causes more problems for us, basically, because how do you explain his life? How do you explain how it functioned, how the empire ran? And remember, the Prophet, peace be upon him, he had people around him that he nurtured that became leaders, and they went as far as Persia and Iraq and Africa and all these places, right?
But the interesting thing is, you can't be a liar and be deluded at the same time. That's why there's only three possibilities. And in Arabian society, it's very, very important. It was important in those days to have a son. In fact, they used to mock the Prophet Muhammad because he didn't have a son. He had daughters, but all his baby boys died. And it was a source of mockery of the Prophet from the pagan Arabs. Actually, what happened was, after these 17 years, he had a son. There was a son from one of his wives, Miriam. She gave birth to a son. His name was Ibrahim. And how would behave? Is this how a deluded person will behave? Or is this the words of a truthful man?
Now you have a third alternative, of course, which people tell you all the time. They say, no, he was not a liar. He was not a crazy man. He was deceived.
That was really, really a nice video, and I would like to share it with all of my friends. It would be such a great experience. So if someone would have to debate me, they can enter this live stream. Okay, I will. Let me share the link in the bio. All right. The I was very I got very hilarious after watching this video. This clearly shows that Muhammad was never a deluded or a liar person. He was just a truthful and a true messenger of God. And the Christian would say, "Oh, he was in the line of Ishmael." And in the uh, in the Bible Gospel of John, I guess Matthew, it says in the chapter number 6, verse number 20, it says that Ishmael, we will send you a prophet into a great nation of the Ishmaels. And in the line of Ishmael, no one has ever claimed prophethood except Prophet Muhammad. So this gave us the clear proof that he was never a deluded or a liar. And how can he learned all these things over that short period of time? That's very insane. Yeah. Thank you guys for watching. That's for today. Jazakallah khair, brother. Inshallah, we will do another live stream tomorrow. For today, Allah Hafiz.